I have canned hundreds of jars of canned food, and I have had so many great successes, and let me tell you, there have also been some that I regret canning, and I wish I hadn't even taken the time to try to can them. Welcome back, I'm Carrie, this is Keep It Simple DIY, and today I'm talking about the 5 things that I regret canning. So let's kick it off with number 1. The very first food that I regret canning is whole blackberries. This is one of the very first things that I ever canned. I think I'd canned maybe 3 or 4 things, never tried anything with meat, and I was like, there's a great deal on blackberries, so let's can them up because then I'll have blackberries that'll be good throughout the winter. It was almost winter at that point. So my thought process was great, and I canned them up properly, followed the process, everything went great. They got canned, they looked great in the jar, it looked like a little bit of the dye was like coming out of them, but otherwise everything was fantastic. I opened a jar and tried it, and it was the most mushy, flavorless thing I had ever tried. It was so just not right. So all the flavor had basically come out of the berries and all of the great texture, and it was basically just disgusting. So I would recommend that you freeze your berries if you want to keep them whole instead of canning them. But if you've canned them and it worked out well, let me know down below, what did you do and how did you get it to work out well? I do know canning blackberries in a jam works great. So if you're canning blackberry jam, that works, but I would not can whole blackberries ever again. The second thing that I regret canning is squash pickles. Yes, you heard that right. I sliced up yellow squash into little rounds and put it in like a pickled solution. It's like vinegar and some sugar with some peppercorns and a few other spices and such. And let me tell you, it actually worked out great, and it had good crunch and it had good flavor, but it had the peppercorn flavor. I didn't love that, and we also don't eat pickles. So that's why specifically I regret canning that. And most importantly, I don't even know if it was a safe and tested recipe, because back then I didn't know that there were only certain sources that were safe and others that weren't. Because if you Google squash pickles, you'll find a ton of them that are all basically the same recipe. And I was looking yesterday and I found a squash relish that had basically the same ingredients, but the squash was shredded. And that was from the National Center for Home Food Preservation, and that actually is a safe and tested recipe, but I could not find one for the pickles. So if you know of one, leave it down below so everyone can follow if they want them. If you love pickles, those are for you. Absolutely by far, but our family, we're like a dill pickle only family, and pickles with cucumbers, not with squash. So they tasted great, their texture was great, but I canned food that my family doesn't enjoy eating. So that's one of the biggest things when you're canning, is to can foods that your family eats, because otherwise you're just gonna have food go to waste. So anytime I'm looking at what foods I want to can, I'm making sure now to only make the foods that we will eat. One example of this is cowboy candy. I've never made it, I never will. We don't eat peppers. We don't really like peppers in this family, and peppers don't like me. So I will never be making that, even though it's a super highly popular recipe. The third thing that I regret canning is something I still have, which is carrots. Now here's why. I think I just canned too many of them at once. What I found out is I don't really love the texture of them, and I don't really love the flavor of them when they're canned. They are good enough. I will still use them all. We won't waste them, but they're a little bit mushier than I would like, and canned vegetables sometimes to me have a weird flavor to them. I don't really know how to explain it, but it's like they taste wet. Is that right? That doesn't make any sense, but the way that canned vegetables taste, it has a totally different flavor than when they're fresh. These were carrots from the garden, and they were delicious. They've lost a lot of their flavor, and now they're just mushy. I can only use them in very few applications. There's a lot of times that I'd want to use them, but I can't just because of how mushy they are. So what I will do in the future is I will take my carrots and I will slice them up, and then I will put them in the freezer. I might or might not blanch them first. I've done it both ways. Blanching, of course, is the way to go, but it's something that I don't always get to, and it's okay. So I will probably never can these in the future, or if I do, I'll can just a few. Now, I have no problem putting carrots in something like a stew that I can. So it's not that I'll never can carrots at all. It's that I won't ever can carrots on their own again, and I definitely will freeze them, and I will either blanch them first or not blanch them. And what I prefer, I don't really love frozen carrots from the store either. I actually only really like fresh carrots and then freezing them on my own, and that can be carrots from the store or from the garden. So this is a never again. I will not be canning carrots. For those of you who have been here, you've heard me talk about these in like every single pantry challenge video that I've had. These are sweet potatoes. These are something I will never can again. And let's just review that pantry challenge footage. And then I have sweet potatoes. And you know, I haven't been a big fan of these sweet potatoes. I love sweet potatoes, but these just came out super mushy. And so I'm finding that even if I make them into mashed potatoes, I really don't love how they come out. And down here, sweet potatoes are something I want to use up. Not all of them, that's a lot of sweet potatoes, but I want to really put a dent in there. What I really want to use up is the sweet potatoes, which I did mention last time. I used 2 of them, and I have quite a few jars in there. They aren't my favorite, which is why I don't go for them. So I want to use them up so they're no longer in there. And then down below, I have some sweet potatoes and regular potatoes. I am not a fan of the way the sweet potatoes came out. These are super mushy, and I'm struggling. Like, I know I can use them in breads and in gnocchi and stuff like that, but they're slow going. As much as I try to use them, it's just super slow. Other than that, everything else in here is pretty new and fresh, aside from these sweet potatoes that have been on the list every pantry challenge for the last couple, and I'm doing good. I had like a half a shelf's worth, and there's only 4 left, so I'm not going to stress using them this time. And sweet potatoes, you know, I don't know. I've really struggled with the sweet potatoes because these are mushy, but otherwise they're hard and they take forever to cook. We are back to present day, and this is the only one left. 1 more to go, and we've used up all of the sweet potatoes that were canned in July of 2021. Now, sweet potatoes, just like the carrots, came out extremely mushy. So if you have any tips to not have mushy sweet potatoes or carrots, leave them down below, please. But these are so mushy. Even to do them in gnocchi, which is how I've been using these mostly, they still are, well, super watery, of course. I have to drain them out, but these they look whole and they look great, but they are extremely mushy. I have canned regular potatoes so many times, and those work out fine. They come out, the texture is great, flavor's a little off. You have to do a few things to kind of get them to be delicious, but these, once you take them out of the jar, their shape is gone. They will all mush together, and then I can only use it in a way that you would use mashed sweet potatoes, but they're overloaded with the liquid. So they're like overhydrated mashed sweet potatoes. And that just doesn't do it for me. I have found very minimal ways that I like to use these. The only way is really just using them up in gnocchi. And I would just not go through the effort of canning these up just for gnocchi, because I could just do the boiling process, which is something that you have to do for this anyways, and then make gnocchi, just have it boil for a little bit longer. So this is a definite no for me. I will never be canning sweet potatoes again. The texture was not it. Flavor's fine, texture just, not happening. Now, what you've all been waiting for is to know what I regret the most with canning, and let me tell you, it's from before I knew about safe and tested recipes. One of the first things I canned, it's the first meat that I canned, and it's teriyaki chicken. I love teriyaki chicken, and I was like, this is great, I can can this because I saw a recipe on Pinterest. Well, it turns out that there aren't any safe and tested recipes for teriyaki chicken, and that's not why I regret it. I mean, of course, I want safe and tested recipes, but I've asked in a lot of Facebook groups if there's any safe recipe for canning teriyaki sauce, and they all say no, despite there being Rebel canner pages that have canned teriyaki sauce on its own or with chicken. So that set aside, safety-wise, here's why I regret it. It was like the worst flavored, burnt, odd textured type of thing. It was really weird. So of course you need to have a liquid when you're canning, and chicken also releases broth when you're cooking it, so it was a very liquidy texture, and the sauce flavor was great going in, but coming out it tasted burnt. I don't know what it is, but what I've found is that if I put anything with sugar in my pressure canner, it comes out tasting burnt. So I have now started to avoid anything that has sugar going into the pressure canner. If it's a water bath recipe, I have found no problems with adding sugar, but every single time I put anything in the pressure canner that has sugar in it or any type of sweetener, it comes out tasting burnt. So this chicken was like the wrong texture, because teriyaki chicken, I think of like chicken thighs or chicken breasts like cut after being cooked. And then it also had the wrong flavor because it was burnt, had the wrong consistency because the sauce was like a water. It was all around wrong and bad and just disgusting. And that same time I actually did orange chicken. I did those two together, and that also was just as much as a fail for the exact same reasons. Texture was wrong, flavor was wrong, it tasted burnt. I will never do that again. That's not to say that I'll never do any flavored meats, although I don't think I will, because it's so easy to just take meats that are unflavored and add flavoring to them after the fact, and then you have the sauce exactly how you want it, and you don't have to worry about it being affected by the canning process. So there you have it. Those are my top 5 foods that I regret canning. I'm interested to know, what foods do you regret canning? Leave those down below. Tell me all about it. Why do you regret canning it? If you're interested in seeing some foods that I think are great to can, I'll leave them here. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new here and you haven't yet, please subscribe. I'd love to see you, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.